Hello, everyone, and welcome to our meetup. Today's meetup is part of our partner series where our partner Matthew Hindley is going to be leading the discussion. Joining him is Riaan Nell, a fractional CTO who has spent his career building systems, leading teams, and solving problems. And today, the two of them are going to discuss what's important when making the right tech investment and how to assess proofs of value and proof of concepts. With that being said, I'm going to hand over to Matt. Today's session is being recorded and it is uploaded on YouTube. Thank you, Matt.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're well. I see a few new faces, so hello to those new faces. For those of you who don't know me, I am Matt Hindley, CEO of Obsidian. We're a sales and implementation partner of the Ecosystem AI platform. Many of you that have joined this webinar and been in our sessions would have heard Jay and the ecosystem team using specific terminology like agonizing. And Jay and team often talk about how they agonize over building a world-class AI platform that continually evolves and delivers value. We agonize over implementing, showcasing, and selling that platform, finding the best ways for our clients to understand the value that the ecosystem platform will bring them. And that means coming across and being a trusted advisor. It means following a lot of heavy governance and process. You spend a lot of time with a customer. You use a lot of understanding and diagnosis of customer problems. And then they say to you, I think it's time for a proof of concept. This often can derail a sales process and isn't a salesperson's favorite words. But when we're in a world where there's so many unknowns, especially when it comes to technology that people aren't completely comfortable with. And we're comfortable with this technology. We've seen it work. We back it. We believe it. Our customers always have to have the seeing is believing construct, especially when it comes to procurement, especially when it comes to newer companies that are being put in front of customers. And I can assure you, AWS, Google, Microsoft are still doing proof of concepts. I am joined today by Riaan, who is a fractional CTO. Riaan's been on the client side of the world. He's been on the First Rand architectural board. He's been on the consulting side of the world, helping sell application delivery and a whole bunch of technical consulting services. Now he finds himself in the middle, where he's a trusted advisor. He gets brought into clients to kind of broker this relationship between vendor and client. Riaan, welcome. And before we dive deep into a proof of concept,
thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about a fractional CTO. Tell us what a fractional CTO does.
Cool. So I think the concept is well understood globally, not quite as popular in South Africa yet. I'm hoping I can play a part in changing that. If you think about it, almost every company today is a technology company. Like whether you're a bank, you're a logistics company, you're into manufacturing, technology plays a role in your business. But not everyone necessarily has a full-time CTO. They don't necessarily have a need or the means for it. I mean, financially, it's expensive. So a fractional CTO is effectively an IT executive on demand. So don't think of it as just being a consultant. Think of it as someone who plays the CTO role in your company. And if you don't have a permanent technology executive, a fractional CTO plugs that tech leadership gap for you. And that spans across everything in your technology stream: people, process, technology, tech stacks, recruitment, whatever needs to be done in the tech space, a fractional CTO can help you to do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Riaan. And do you get involved in all sides of the process? Or are you limited to certain strategy? Where do you tend to get involved?
Ultimately, it's a consultant's answer. It depends. Every client is unique. If you're an early stage startup and you're trying to build an MVP, then you've got questions like, what tech stack should I use? What should my architecture look like? Where should I deploy this? That's what a fractional CTO would help you with. In a scale-up, it might be a question of, we've proven this idea. We now want to roll it out. Are we adequately covered in terms of cybersecurity? Will our architecture scale? How do we approach this? How do we build the right team? In a large enterprise, it might be, we're in this heavily regulated space. We want a 5-year technology roadmap. Please come and help us do that. So it's actually interesting to try and sell, because you can't really go to a client and go, I do this one thing. You have to go, I can do pretty much whatever needs to be done, which is hard to put into a little box and try and sell.
Okay, let's jump into the meat of our conversation today. We're going to talk about proof of concept versus proof of value. Sometimes we use the word proof of install. Being in AI, it's quite a tricky concept to prove. Are we really proving concepts like machine learning that are proven on a regular basis? Or are we proving value inside a customer's space that it's going to deliver a business outcome? Or are we proving that this technology will integrate into a customer's systems, and will it be able to ingest the data and give the answer to the question being asked? Do you see, from your view of the world, Riaan, AI proof of concepts being different to off-the-shelf SaaS tool proof of concept?
I think the thing with off-the-shelf software is it's generally very well defined. Like you get a project or a product and it does what it says on the tin. If it's a payroll solution, it's going to do payroll. I think AI tends to be more open-ended in the sense of it's a tool that you deploy and it has to try and solve something contextual in a client's environment. And I think the thing with the PoC for me as well is a PoC is a technical endeavor. It's asking, can I actually do this? If you've got an existing product or solution that you're putting down, the technical viability has already been proven. What you should be asking there is not a technical, can this be done question. It's a business question that says, should this actually be done? Like in our context, in our business, is this thing going to add value? And that becomes a very different conversation from the standard technical conversation. And I think especially in AI, people get misled by the bells and whistles and all the shiny new tech. And then people want to get on the AI bandwagon, but they haven't found the problem they want to solve yet.
Do you see the word proof of concept coming more out of your business or both? Or do you think it's the term? It's like, okay, cool. Before we buy anything that's technology-based, whether it be AI or whatever it may be, we're doing a proof of concept.
Proof of concept fits more in the tech space. It's that question of, can this actually be done? It's a tool. It has its place, like any other tool. But when you want to prove business viability, a proof of concept is probably not the way to go. If you're building something brand new and fundamentally different from what's ever been done before, then you actually want to prove the technology. Then you want to go, I think I can do X, Y, and Z, and I think it's technically feasible. And you can prove whether that's going to work or not. But the fact that you can do it technically still doesn't actually answer your business question. If you look at AI in the product sense, and you're putting down an AI product, that to me is not a PoC conversation. That's a business value conversation.
I saw a hand go up. Thanks, Riaan.
I also saw a hand. It was Rushka, but I think she put it down.
Rushka, you want to weigh in, or look at David?
So I do have a question when it comes to, so thanks for that. Please, just a heads up, a lot of this is Greek to me. But what happens when you are working on, so in the loyalty space, right? When you're working on tech sort of supports the loyalty environment. So where the commercial loyalty is business, but the tech is proof of concept. So Riaan, then I'm now a bit confused, or rather don't agree that PoC only sits within a tech space, because we've been asked for a proof of concept within loyalty, which is the commercial business space. Does this make sense?
What's the concept that you want to prove there? Because I think it's probably somewhat of a subjective term as well. To me, the proof of concept is always a technical thing. When you're actually trying to prove that it's going to work in your business and add value to your business, it comes back to what metrics you use to define success. And is that a business metric, in which case I would say it's probably closer to a proof of value, or is it some sort of technical metric that just says, we can build this piece of software or put together this AI solution, and it's actually going to do what we expect it to do.
Okay, I hear you. So I think, look, I'm learning my way here, but coming within the loyalty space, for example, when you do have, so we've got a system that's called a smart contract system. So when people are shopping, points are awarded to our members, right? That's within the tech environment. However, the commercial loyalty part is every time that person is shopping, it's adding to the bottom line. So do you get what I'm saying? We already have a tech, but it's about how do you marry the two? It feels like there's a bit of a hybrid in between the two.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like you're trying to prove that technology will work in your space and answer the business question at the same
100%.
time. Yeah. No, that's valuable. Thanks, David.
Thank you so much.
Hi, it's Sarushka. Matt Hindley rings a bell. We did a Standard Bank stunt together, possibly with Agile or
We absolutely did. We were running around the bank trying to get them to become a lot more nimble and agile.
Yes, I remember this. The name rings a bell. I'm actually on my own at the moment. I'm a director at Razor Bar Analytics. And in 2017, when I was talking about artificial intelligence, blockchain and cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, people thought I was talking French. Now I'm glad to be at the table, and every time I open social media, it's either artificial intelligence or cryptocurrency or it's blockchain. I have different various parts of my business. One which we also rolling out and proof of concept in an idea. It's called rank and rent, and we're creating digital assets where we'll rent it out with traffic. So we're looking, ideally, our target market is low search engine optimization guys who are maybe on page 8 or 9 of a search with the Safari, Firefox, or Google. And then maybe they go into LinkedIn and there might be 1 or 2 people you pick up there. So their digital presence could be a lot better. And the guys are spending like $6,000 a month on Google ads. I'm like, you know what? I'll actually engrave that on my ass for 6,000 Rand a month for a Google ad. The reason I'm listening on this is because of rank and rent, because my fractional CTO, I like that concept, and I are hammering on this particular idea because it has legs. There's no software development. It's like off the shelf software. It's vanilla. You know, you can white label. It's white labeled. You cushy foot it, and it comes depending on the size of your business. We will send through 20 warm leads or 5 warm leads, depending on the package that you take with us. That's kind of the idea. And obviously going out on the internet and having POS available, etc., personal information from a security perspective. With the PoC, we're starting off with pest control because it's compliance driven, and possibly the Gauteng area. And we've done our homework to roll that out, and that's why I'm on this call, is to see where we could work together from bureaucracy, red tape, security, authentication perspective for rank and rent.
Absolutely. It's good to hear from you again. I think we could definitely have a few conversations about this and share some notes. Thanks for dialing in, Anushka. It's great to hear from you again. I'm going to pull this back into, we've spoken about proof of value, proof of concept, proof of install. And you said proof of concept, very much a technical term. Proof of value, we're heading closer to business. Would you choose one over the other? I mean, David mentioned that he feels like he's got to do both, and knowing what we've had to do to get proof of concepts going and off the ground, because they are big undertakings and they're not free undertakings. Our clients pay for these things because they're important to them. To do both at the same time, or is it just terminology?
I think it depends on the problem. I'm trying to think of a retail type of example. I think maybe to David's point, loyalty and things like that could play into that space as well. So what's coming to mind for me, and this isn't really AI focused, but I'm trying to draw a distinction between the two. If you want to track feet into a store, you might try and put some kind of sensor on a turnstile and feed that into a database. And you want to know that this sensor is going to give you the data that you want. In my mind, that is a proof of concept. If you can then take that data and go, most of my customers come in through this particular entrance, I'm going to put a massive ad for my loyalty program right there. You can then go, I expect my signups to increase by 200% through using this data and making that decision. That to me is where the proof of value component comes in. I think it's probably still a fairly subjective conversation. I think you can define it in multiple ways. But for me, that's how I would differentiate. One is this thing technically feasible? Can it actually be done? And then here's what we expect we can do from a business point of view. Let's prove whether or not that actually works. And I think that's where the different metrics come into play as well. I think when you start talking about a business metric, so things like I want customer satisfaction to increase, I want my people to be more productive by some other metric that I can define. How much time do they spend capturing leave, for example, if I can streamline that process through AI, then you can start measuring something that indicates whether or not you're actually getting that business value, with the common theme there being value, and then I link that back to the proof of value. It's like something concrete in business terms that you want to prove.
Can I
and
step in?
technology is an enabler for that.
Can I step in there for a minute to the hostess? Riaan, I really resonate with what you're saying. because at the end of the day, those metrics that you talk about, those success metrics, times by a notional rate, should actually give you a notional income statement. So you can run a business off those metrics. Gone are the days where you have to wait until the end of the month to find the income statement and be reactive. With metrics built the right way, you can have a daily dashboard with 5 metrics would tell you whether your business going north or south. And then you can pick up and be proactive rather than sit in an exco 1 month later and talk nonsense about what happened. You can be more agile in terms of corrective action and learning while rolling out a PoC.
The beauty of the ecosystem platform, we often talk about where the dashboarding happens. They often joke about, let's turn it off and then watch what happens to the dashboard. We're never allowed to turn it off. The luxury you have now with AI, especially with real-time AI, is the fact that we can see the metrics happen in real time. If a campaign goes out and it's not getting the click-through rate or the action that we want, that we can change the campaign. This brings me back to the PoC concept. In most of our clients, which are banks, telcos, and insurers, governance really prohibits real-time proof of concepts. When we're trying to show the capability of a platform that's genuinely real-time, a lot of other platforms claim to be real-time, but they manage to speed up batch to a point where you think it's real-time, but it's not. You can't get through the governance to do a real-time proof of concept. We've got a banking client that did something clever, where they went more for a pilot as opposed to a proof of concept. So they actually bought the license for the software. We took on a few use cases and they spent the year seeing how this could work. What's your view on a pilot over a proof of concept?
So the pilot to me is where you start seeing real business value, because you're exposing something to the real world, to real customers, to real use cases. I think if I can refer to an old technology joke, the developer walks into a bar and orders a beer. QA tester walks into a bar and orders 99 beers, -1 beers, and ABC beers. And a customer walks into the bar and asks where the bathroom is, and the bar explodes. When you actually start exposing things to the real world, I think that's where you really get meaningful feedback. Because in the context of a PoC, you can go, cool, my technology works. But that just tells you that the thing can do what you expected it to do in the technical way you thought it would. It doesn't tell you whether it's actually going to work in the real world. And I think that's where a pilot, because so you reduce risk, because it is still, I want to say, fairly self-contained. You narrow your focus, you've got a subset of users, maybe an internal cohort of staff, so you don't suffer reputational damage if it goes wrong. But now you've got a way to test it in the real world. And I think it's that real world feedback where you get real value. Just because you can do something doesn't always mean you should.
Thanks. Another big thing that comes up, especially with AI and proof of concepts around that, is data. There's so many things with data and the governance of data around PoP, GDPR, legislation has become so prohibitive that a lot of startups and innovators from Europe have moved and innovate in places like the US and places where there's less legislation around data, so that they can create and experiment. And a lot of the time, you'll get to a point in a proof of concept, like, are we going to use real customer data? Are we going to do this? It's a big elephant in the room, right? So what is your thoughts on when a customer goes, oh, our data's not ready, or how do we get around the data part?
I see there is a hand. Do we want to address that first before I continue?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry if I'm talking too much. So being a channel partner to TransUnion, it's always nice to pre-sell to clean up the data. I think because otherwise you're standing in a situation with garbage in and garbage out. And so like I said, a bank thought they had 10 million customers. They actually probably have 6 million. I don't know the real numbers, but it's because there's so many duplicates. And Matthew opened up his first account in Musgrave, moved from Schlanger, ended up in Pinetown, then Alberton, to move from South Sea to Vodacom, and also changed his ID number and ended up in Rosebank, but counted 3 or 4 times. I would suggest a data cleanup is always a pre-sell to any engagement with the client. They can see before you even engage with artificial intelligence, one needs to map the maturity of the data as point one.
Thanks. We also use cold starts to manage the data issue. But Riaan, what do you reckon?
I think there are actually 2 points on that question. The first one is just around the compliance and the regulatory component. I think I'm maybe a bit biased because I've spent a big chunk of my career in financial services, but if you work in a heavily regulated industry like that, there is no way around it. Like conforming to the regulation, the requirements is your price of admission. You can't play in that space if you can't do it. So I think whatever you do, that's always a constraint that you have to keep in mind, because you can do the most amazing, shiniest, flashiest PoC, but if you can't cross that regulatory barrier, then you're dead in the water to start with. And then on the data question, financial services background and all of that, I think good data is key, because if you consider something like credit screening, if you feed bad data in, you become too lenient with the loans you give out, then you've got a problem. Or you become too restrictive and now you lose customers, you've got a different kind of problem. But that doesn't mean that your entire data set has to be perfect right off the bat. I think it also comes back to what is the hypothesis that you want to test? What data do you actually need to do that? How do you get that subset of data to the point that you need? And you don't have to worry about the rest of that stage. So focus and narrowing what you're looking at. And then again, if you're doing something like a pilot, to your point earlier, Matt, then you only need a subset of your data to be 99% correct. The rest can continue to flow in, systems can learn from it, but it is ultimately a subjective question that requires you to take risk into account as well. And if you can manage your risk and work on adequate data for a particular use case, then I think you'll be in the clear.
We have a comment from Francois in the chat, Matt, if you want to take a look at that.
Do you want to take a stab at that, Riaan?
Go for it. I'm just reading Francois's comments in the chat.
So concept versus value sounds like a bit of a spectrum. If technical business measures like time to complete a task or number of mistakes or rejects are measured as opposed to bottom line measures of profit, what's the difference between a technical measure and a measure of business value? How much some or other executives care about the measure?
When I look at the metrics you've got here, all of those would be business metrics in my mind. It's everything someone on an exco would care about. Time to complete a task or mistakes, etc. Your COO would probably care about that. Your difference to the bottom line measures of profit, your CFO, your CEO will care about that. When I talk about technical measures, it's something like, is this actually technically possible to do? Like if I've got this, going back to the revolving door example in retail, if I've got a particular sensor, can I put that sensor on this door and get it to communicate with this database that sits in the cloud and test networks and things in between? When I say technical, I mean that level of technical implementation detail. All of the metrics that you've identified there to me indicate business value. So technical is going to think the things that your developers would have to deal with. I hope that clears up the terminology that I used and what I was actually referring to.
Yeah, it does help clear it up. Thanks. I'm sorry for not writing that very well.
No. I didn't need to.
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with the definition. From your clarified explanation, I'm getting that any measure that essentially returns a Boolean value, and if the question was just, does it work or doesn't it work, would you consider a proof of concept or technical thing?
The proof of concept question for me is it technically feasible? Can I get the technology to do the thing that I think it can do? So yes, that would be Boolean. The business metrics, I think, are things you could typically put numbers to that in some way or another translate to the bottom line. Either people are more effective, therefore you save costs, or you become better at selling, therefore you generate more revenue.
I'm going to delve into the concept of evaluating only what matters. That becomes tricky when you're using technology like AI. that, especially like the ecosystem platform, which can really do a lot of things and be quite broad. What's your thinking around the challenge of AI trying to do too much, trying to solve too much? How do you help teams scope tightly and test only what matters?
I think it comes back to, if you think about agile and lean and all these things we've had in software for ages, how do you identify the one thing that really matters? I think that comes back to engaging with your stakeholders, getting consensus on the one thing you want to test, because otherwise your PoC becomes, or your proof of value, or whatever you want to build becomes overly complex. You're trying to test too many things. It becomes hard to keep track of what's actually going on. So to me, it's about really finding that one thing and that one hypothesis that you want to test, and then iterating and building on top of that. It is quite a tricky, because I think it differs for every business as well. But it's the same old argument about managing scope creep. You want to figure out what's important, focus on that, and then continue to iterate on top of it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Look, a lot of the proof of concepts will go after, say, I'll give you an example. We're trying to show a client how we can help them get their customers to use their credit cards more. So it will be very focused, but because we're using concepts like behavioral algorithms and machine learning, there's a lot of latent value that starts coming out, like hyper-personalization and the potential of cross-sell, the potential and the idea of, okay, cool, we've learned now that we can get customers to use their credit cards more. That then lends itself to retention, because if you are starting to use your credit card more and it's only your second or third credit card and it's not your primary bank credit card, you're a lot more inclined to stay with that customer. So it very easily can become this massive value pot, but you still got to bring back the focus.
And I think that's probably a tricky thing to do, because we get excited by all the possibilities. But if I put on my CTO or technology management hat, is really ensuring that you maintain that focus. I think another point you've touched on that I find interesting about the amount of data we've got and where AI is actually going is, historically, the customer used to be this abstract concept. You could maybe try and fit them into a demographic. They are 30 to 40 years old, they work in banking, and they live in this area. But with the volume of data we can gather on people now, the customer can actually become an individual. Like, you can know, example, banking apps tracking your location, exactly who I am, where I go, what I do, who I'm with, when I do it, which means the level of targeting that you can do when trying to sell me a product can be targeted to me down to a T, like exactly who I am. And I think there are always ethical considerations to keep in mind as well.
Yeah,
great power and great responsibility.
100%. I see there's a comment Rushko's chat about the funding PoCs, and I'm actually happy to pick up on that because it can be a contentious issue. I was in a conversation the other day where we've come quite far with a specific client. We're about to get into putting the PoC together. They've agreed to pay for it. We very specifically will not do a PoC for free. You know, most free PoCs, clients should then sign the deal to say, if it's proven, we will buy it. Because most consulting houses would have to take really smart and expensive people out of stable projects that are delivering to their bottom line for a very short period of time, prove a technology that's proven to work, to then deliver that. So we're very strict about a paid for PoC, but there are still clients that will say, if you are trying to prove that technology works in our space, then you should pay for it. What are your thoughts on that? And in your fractional CTO role, how would you advise the marrying of these two worlds? Because you've been on both sides.
So let's go back to the question. Is it around how to justify the funding of a PoC and who covers the... So I think it's always, again, it's going to be subjective. It's going to depend on the customer and their appetite and their budget. It comes back to showing the business value. The outcome, be it a PoC, a proof of value, or a pilot, is that there is always risk involved. As a vendor, doing it for free puts you at risk because you're trying to prove something. And the outcome there either is it works, which is great, and then you get the deal, or it doesn't work, and then that's where the process stops. I think we should also not forget that all of these are actually experiments. It can have a positive or a negative outcome. For a customer, if you do it at your risk, that's great for them, but it's not necessarily always fair. So I think that also comes back to commercial negotiations. And if you can guarantee that you'll lock in a deal if it all goes well. That's great. But again, just being cognizant of the risk that it might not actually pan out in the way that you expect. But again, that's where you could then pivot and just try something slightly different, because the experiment still comes with learning. It would be, I think, silly to just ignore the learnings.
Yeah, and I think, when we've put together PoCs, I'm very strict. Obviously, if you're going to charge for it, you're going to have to get value out of it. So we try and avoid any sort of simulated environment PoCs, because in a simulated environment, it's usually going to be a throwaway effort. It's going to be like, yes,
exactly.
Great, done data, and the value that a customer gets out of it is fairly minimal. So
you want to get it into the real world in front of real customers as soon as you can. That goes back to things like lean and the idea of an MVP. You don't want it to be perfect necessarily, but you want it to be in a customer's hands so that you can get real world feedback.
Yeah, I suppose if the customer is going to pay for something and it does work, it should be the stepping stone into the full build. We've managed to get through governance, prove installation, integration, and data ingestion. How do we then take advantage of that to get the first use case going?
Exactly. Like, what's the next hypothesis? We've proven this one thing works. What's the next thing we want to prove? And then once we've done that, what's the next thing? And it comes back to the earlier conversation, I think, also about just maintaining focus on what's actually important, just so that your scope doesn't completely run away with you.
100%. I see there are some comments in the chat. Do you want to read them to us, Madison, and then we'll pick them up?
Perfect. Okay. So, first of all, Rushka says she wanted to chat about funding the PoC, which you've just kind of covered, the chicken before the egg. And then from Tammy, we've got very sweet. Hi there, Tammy. And he says, we are developing an energy management system for high energy consumers and producers, including independent power producers, as well as state utilities. One major component of our project is leveraging AI/machine learning to develop a system that has the ability to predict energy usage patterns based on historical usage. Understanding that ML solutions require enormous amounts of data in order to train the models, how best can we approach PoC in the absence of data?
I'll answer some of that, but I do see some of my ecosystem friends and colleagues from a technical point of view who'd probably be able to answer some of the enormous amounts of data part. There are platforms and use cases that crave a lot of data. I imagine, so fraud, we know we need to understand patterns. So the more data we give it, the better the outcome. Your use case, I'm not too sure if we could use a lower amount of data, or if there's technology that doesn't need to be so heavy on data that can start developing patterns and then sort of referencing them as you get more transaction. And I suppose it means when we talk about cold start is that it needs a fair amount of interaction to be able to define those patterns. I don't know how much interaction your use case would have. Anyone want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so I can comment on it. I think if you're at the point where you have a solution that you need data for and you haven't done it before, the template PoC, PoV approach is probably not the best one to follow. I think then you need to find a company to partner with. We have a product, you'll be selling them yourselves and your vision and say, look, we can really change the way that your energy management stuff works, and this is who we are, and we're great people, and let's work together to make this happen. And as part of that, we'll use your data and get learnings from it, and you'll get the value. You generally will charge them a discounted price and work personally with them. So I think you have to follow that approach more than the generic PoC approach, in my view.
Thank you for that, Eric. I see Tammy put a thumbs up. Our next comment is from Gabriella, and she says, better go for beachhead use cases where you have high level of confidence, then cross-sell what is possible next use case PoC. I think that is just a comment, not really a question. And then Rushka commented or replied to Tammy saying, encrypted or anonymous data is a start, data is king. Cool, thanks.
Those are great comments, thanks. All right, I know we're heading into the last 10 minutes, and I think we've had great audience interaction, so I still want that to continue. I want to just get on sort of a view and advice, to sort of sum up this, advice to AI buyers and tech evaluators. You've been working with AI vendors and startups. What are the red flags you look out for when a vendor pitches a PoC?
For me, it's a red flag if a vendor walks in and immediately starts pushing their solution. It's this thing of if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Like the ideal engagement for me starts with a vendor trying to understand what the problem is, what a client's challenges are, what they're trying to solve, and then bringing that back to their solution. I think just blindly coming in and like sell, to me is a red flag. I want a vendor who actually cares about the customer's business and the customer's problems. Because otherwise the vendor is just acting in their own interest. And I think it's something that should be a partnership and that should really revolve around the customer's needs. So it starts with customer empathy and understanding.
How can leadership teams avoid months of flashy prototyping and demos that never actually passing the finish line?
I think that's a simple one. Just get it in front of a real customer as soon as you possibly can. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just get it out there and start using it. So something like a pilot. Otherwise, it becomes analysis paralysis and you get stuck in this pursuit of perfection. And there's always this one more thing you want to do, one other use case you want to try and add in. So focus on the one thing you want, get in front of people, and then build on top of that.
Nice. All right. I'm happy to open up to the floor if there are other questions, comments, or thoughts, specifically around proof of concepts.
Thanks, guys. This was really interesting. I'm wondering, when you engage with a potential vendor, do you ever benchmark against other vendors, especially within the AI space? How do you, as a CTO, like, what are your checks or processes that you go through?
So I think as you would with any other type of product, you'd want to look at their case studies, you might want to talk to some of their existing customers, and then you would want to see something in practice, like show me a demo of your platform. I want to see if it works. And then if that all goes well, then you want to move on to something like a pilot. I think when it's a brand new vendor with brand new technology, it's a bit of a gamble that you take on them if you don't have case studies and other customers you can talk to. When something is new and innovative, that's going to be par for the course.
Thanks so much. That's cool.
Often we get put into a box where, like, oh no, but we're using Databricks and SageMaker and all of these other technologies. So when we talk about benchmarking and looking at other vendors, we speak about ecosystem very much as an adjacency. It solves really focused customer engagement use cases. We wouldn't want an enterprise to change any of their heavy data tooling. If you want an acceleration into being able to solve some use cases in real time really quickly, you can use your other data tools to help augment that and allow that outcome and process to be a lot more rapid and built in with a lot more quality. There are a lot of vendors out there. There's a lot of tooling out there. A lot of them can work really well together if you're solving business problems and go after solving that business problem. Any other thoughts and comments? I think I saw something pop into the chat.
Yes, we have a question from Keith. Do you agree that in traditional software, a PoC just had to prove something could be done? Reliability was assumed to follow with good engineering. But with stochastic AI systems, demos are cheap and often misleading. Do you think the definition of a PoC is shifting in AI from proving feasibility to proving reliability in real world conditions? Have you seen this impact decision making on what AI to invest in?
I'll let them answer that first. That's a great question.
I agree with the point around traditional software development. PoC is the technical proof that it can be done. I don't think reliability was necessarily always assumed. PoC to me is very much a hack it and patch it and very unrefined way to prove that the core thing you want to do is technically feasible. I think in the AI space, demos can be cheap and misleading, but I think that's where it's also important to actually get it in front of real customers as soon as possible in a controlled environment. Talking about things like a pilot with internal staff. If you're doing loans with credit screening or something like that, try that with a subset of your staff so you've got real data, but it's still in an environment where you can do it relatively safely. These people know that they're part of a pilot. It's not going out to your actual customers, and there's a risk of reputational damage if it doesn't go well.
We both sort of come from that traditional software development world. When it comes to AI, it is tricky for what you're trying to show because there's so many moving parts. You're not just showing machine learning or a part of something. You are showing something that needs to be learning and have this constant flow. It's very difficult to sandbox it, keep it in a very safe environment, and then show real value. You have to expose it to the elements and change governance a bit if you really, really want to see the value of it. Otherwise, the demos and what you're mentioning, Keith, a lot of it can be smoke and mirrors unless it's the real deal in your environment with your real data. Any other questions, thoughts?
I have a question for Riaan. It's more of a clarification point because I really enjoyed what you said about when approaching how to be a vendor or how to sell your solution, understanding the customer and not just trying to make yourself look good. But obviously working in a B2B business, you sell your product to people who are going to use it, which then benefits their customers. So when you talk about understanding the customer and their points, you're talking about the business's customers, also the people who are going to use the product and understanding their pain points and goals and challenges.
So I think the two go hand in hand. So when I say the customer, I mean the organization that you're selling to, but their problem and their need is probably going to relate to something that their customer wants at the end of the day. So I think it's really about understanding what they want to solve. Quite often that's probably going to be what they want to offer their customers. Or maybe it could be a slightly different angle on the AI space. We can talk both about how it supports your customers, but also how you can support your organization internally. So if you're looking at productivity optimization, the question might be, how do you actually help their staff?
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions, thoughts, passing comments? We almost at 5 o'clock. Just want to be hugely thankful to Riaan, to the ecosystem team that pulled this together, and obviously everyone that dialed in and shared their thoughts. It was an awesome discussion and something that we're really passionate about. We'll see you next week, Wednesday, same place, same time.
Thank you, everyone. Very insightful. Cheers.